T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Own it, own it, own it, Kong. I own it. It did.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet. Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet.
Woo! Happy Monday, y'all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is CK Trinidad. Welcome to Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet, WWT Lifestyle. I'm not alone. Mr. Bonner's in the building. I saw you was wearing like a suit or something. You had like some event where they honoring you, or what was going on with that?
Yeah, that's actually happening a week from this Friday in Vegas. So yeah, that's going down. It's gonna be fun. I'll probably have to tell you guys about that at some point. But yeah,
Are you bringing your wife to Vegas? That's the next question.
She's not going. She says I've got to work. So I said, okay, I said, okay, hey.
Right. Well,
Some things we do alone, so it's all
there
good.
it is. And Cedric with the new hairstyle, you stunned on them for his long weekend. What's happening?
Nah, I'm laying low, getting some stuff done. The fun will be had when it gets had. That was last weekend though.
The fun will be had when it gets had.
There's something to that. I don't know.
All right. Cool.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
All righty
Starting
then.
off pretty hot around here.
I mean, I'm just going off what you're saying.
Yeah.
But we'll leave that for another time, I guess. We'll hit the first story.
Oh man, let's move on.
What do we got?
Well, of course, everybody is still talking about Money in the Bank from over the weekend, an absolutely massive premium live event from the WWE. I mean, the international crowds are really like the thing. And so this took place, of course, in London. Of course, we had a whole after show, so obviously we won't go through all the gory details, but it was amazing. I'll just say that it was amazing. There were surprises. There were unexpected turns. The ending was crazy. We've got a new Mr. and Miss Money in the Bank. I mean, like, it was everything. It was really everything. And I don't really know what the greatest highlight of this was. I mean, you've got the London crowd knowing all the words to every single song, which has to put them like in contention for best crowd of the year, along with San Juan. You've got, of course, Damian Priest, Mr. Money in the Bank. You've got Io Sky, Miss Money in the Bank, the return of Drew McIntyre, a surprise showing from John Cena, who wants WrestleMania to be in London. And I think that's a pretty dope idea, actually. And then, of course, no titles really changed hands, except for those women's tag titles, with perhaps the greatest heel turn. Or is it a heel turn? Was it really a face turn for Shayna Baszler turning on Ronda Rousey? Just a crazy, crazy night. And then, of course, you've got Roman Reigns being pinned for the first time in 3.5 years. Money in the Bank was pretty insane.
a lot of like. Well, go first, Cedric.
You didn't like it?
I did like it, but the heel turn with Shayna and Ronda.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like that was too soon, personally, because if you go and watch the interview that I did with Shayna on the press junket for WrestleMania, we had talked about the fact that, you know, her and Ronda are legit friends, for real. And, you know, this is going way back to like UFC, etc. I've said this story like a billion times. And I feel like there's something there. Like, what is the, and I see Santana's in the chat saying Ronda's going to be leaving soon. And I get that, but if that were the case and they knew that, then their partnership should have happened a long time ago. Like, it's kind of one of those things where, I think I said this maybe last week or whenever last I was on the show, like WWE, like whatever makes sense, they just do the opposite. But certain things like make sense as far as just providing the story. And the Ronda and Shayna storyline should have happened a long time ago, along with so many other stories. So I get, if you know, everything Santana's saying is correct, where Ronda's not going to be there for much longer. I get that to push forward the story, but I feel like we missed a part we could have capitalized on. So that's why, you know, that was the one thing. Like, damn, okay, that's what we doing.
Yeah, I also think in there, you know, there are a couple of the other added factors that always end up getting forgotten about, which is, you know, probably the time that this should have happened, Vince was running creative and Vince wasn't very high on Shayna. And, you know, then you had the period where Ronda was actually out injured. So I think there's probably a few things where this could have happened earlier, but some other things were at work that really didn't allow it to happen earlier. In no way am I mad at this. I'm not mad at this at all. And I think I'm not mad at it because, you know, if this tag team title situation is now going to be defended upon 3 brands, I don't think there's anybody in their right or left mind that actually thinks that Ronda and Shayna would go and fight an NXT team and the NXT team would have a chance. You know, so for me, I think they did a lot in this one move. Shayna turning on Ronda gets Ronda out of the title picture. Shayna now has a feud with Ronda that we all wanted to see. The women's tag titles goes back to a team that, quite honestly, could have a competitive match in all 3 brands. You actually put a degree of, you know, validity back on the women's tag titles as well. So I think it did a lot of things in one fell swoop, and it got us all talking. So I think it worked because of the shock factor. I think if we saw it coming, we would have been like, eh. So yeah, that's just.
I agree with some of those points. Just the only one, and I've been about this in the post show. The only one is I think it took away from the tag team titles, and the tag team titles kind of got swept in there for no reason. When if you were going to turn on Ronda and you wanted to build some type of dissension, there was none. So it was like, my thing is like, why would I fight my adversaries for a whole match and then at the last minute turn on Ronda? Just there's a lot of layers to it that don't make sense. And if you wanted to build that dissension to where it was capable to not see coming, but it made sense, then they should have never took the belts off Isla and Alba. You should have they actually needed that rub way more since they're on the main roster now. You could have unified with them. I agree about Ronda going back down to NXT. Doesn't make business sense for her to do that. But they could have used the tag titles way more in that sense. I think it's a good thing because if you give us the NXT Shayna, that Elimination Chamber Shayna that we saw for a glimpse before the Pandemic Mania, then it's a win. And if the rumors are true that Ronda's about to leave, her contract's up, maybe she go back to UFC for a period of time, which I have some thoughts on that for another time. But if this elevates Shayna to that stratosphere, then cool. Because we're seeing we'll talk about Io. We're seeing that kind of passing of the torch of a little bit from the 4 Horsewoman era to a new era of people at the top of the card.
Well, we'll see. We did do a post show about it Saturday, and the Salt Shakers will also be discussing it this evening. So, you know, there's a lot to talk about, but I guess the good thing is, I think Triple H. No, it wasn't Triple H. Somebody referred to it as it was Cody referred it to as the dark ages, whereas where we are now, we're getting more meteor PLEs. So, you know, there's stuff for us to talk about and actually have a great conversation and discussion and, you know, things we like and don't like, etc. Whereas some of them, you know, back in the day, it was just all trash. So we're in a good place now where we can have these healthy conversations and discussions and, you know, what ifs and, you know, storylines and all that stuff. So, you know, I'm definitely happy for that. So shout out to, you know, everybody, obviously the wrestlers, but everybody backstage kind of creating these storylines. So yeah. What do we got next?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, coming out of this, one of the big moments, of course, was the end of the Premium Live event, the Bloodline Civil War, the Usos against Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa. We didn't really know what was going to happen in this one. And I think most people figured that there was going to be a way that Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa would win. I mean, like, that's just kind of, you know, you had the whole promo that happened Saturday involving Paul Heyman, who came out in tears and was saying they're going to annihilate the Usos. The Usos will be gone from WWE. And the unthinkable happens. Roman Reigns gets pinned for the first time in 3.5 years by Jey Uso, who apparently is the person who gave Roman his first pin on the main roster 10 years ago. Crazy storytelling, right? Now we get a tweet today from the Usos who say in a nutshell, well, hey, listen, guess what? This Friday is the trial of Roman Reigns on SmackDown in, of all places, Madison Square Garden. I can't write a story this good. And, you know, you think about how valuable the whole situation was with the tribal court for Sami Zayn at the top of the year and what that ultimately did for and to him. What in the world will a tribal court for Roman Reigns look like this Friday night? Who's going to be involved? Who's going to be sitting at the head of the table? What charges will they find for him? If they find him guilty of what, I don't know. Is he no longer the tribal chief? Like, there's so many questions that, like, literally we could tune in for this Friday night and be totally good. Like, I don't know what matches they're going to have, but this is what everybody's tuning in to see. The tribal court for Roman Reigns, the trial of Roman Reigns. Is crazy.
Yeah, I agree with you. So many like questions. Are we kicking? Because can he still be the tribal chief if he's gotten pinned?
That's the question. And pinned by someone in the family. Like, if he got pinned outside of the family, okay, somebody potentially didn't do their job. But if he got pinned by Jey Uso, the same guy who was the right-hand man, right? So if the right-hand man, you know, this is interesting. I mean, like, I don't know what the rules of this tribe is. Is it like the U.S. government where if the president is out, the vice president steps in? And like, is there this chain of command and this pecking order that we see for the tribal chief? Who becomes, I mean, is it Solo? Is it Jey? Do we do away with the tribal chief? Like, what do we do?
Here's the thing, and I'm already going to preface this where I'm going to give myself a womp for this, and I'm also going to take it out of the box and put it back in the box. Hypothetically, right, if we have a different tribal chief, and I mean, I'm sure everybody, I haven't gotten to watch the whole interview, but you had the Usos, you know, saying that, you know, they liked when Trinity was on the road with them. And technically she's not, you know, she's on a contract, but she's, you know, Impact is a little different. If we have a new tribal chief, can that tribal chief now bring back Trinity? Again, booze. This is fantasy booking. We talked about extensively, I think, on Friday, how all the things. But I'm just saying, we took out the elements of why they left, and you know, we're just doing it on face value, what we see on TV, and take out the politics. That would be a really great thing. That I don't think it's going to happen, but just, you know, I just want you to ride in the possible imagination of that lane in that universe. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, since they're in New York City in Madison Square Garden, one of the houses that the Samoan family built, I don't think it's completely unrealistic if, you know, the elders are well in health and can travel from Pennsylvania. If we see the elders show up, Afa, Sika, you know, I mean,
that's immediately what I thought of, honestly, just because before it became the trial with Sami Zayn, they were all supposed to be there, right?
They were supposed to be there, yeah, and they couldn't because of, you know, some illness and some travel issues. But certainly New York City is not all that far from where they are in Pennsylvania. They might even be traveling there as we speak to get some rest, to get ready for Friday night. That'd be crazy.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting segment. There's so many ways you can really go with this, and you can tell there's no end in sight. I can see the wiggle room out of this whole dethroning of this tribal chief. Is like it was a tag match at the end of the day. It wasn't a singles match. It wasn't singles competition. So even though he was pinned in tag team action. There was no one-on-one. So they'll probably build towards that for SummerSlam. But I'm still waiting for the ball to drop because I feel like that match as a whole really elevated the Usos as like the dominant duo of the past decade and some change. Because if the all reigning tribal chief couldn't topple his own cousins, it's like it shows how powerful they are. But I'm still waiting for the ball to drop to get this like psychopathic Roman to just emerge and just destroy everything. And I feel like the shock value with that would be like maybe Roman turning on Solo and like just completely eliminating Solo from the field and adding that shock factor. Something has to happen because it's like it's just too much. It seems like it's happening very sudden, but like on a trend, like, okay, Roman's going to lose everything. But the rumors are that he'll still be champion at next year's WrestleMania. So I don't know what to think.
To that end, I think one of the things, and I think we learned this at the press conference, and we talk about this here regularly, rumors are whatever they are, right? And, you know, if they're not true, which most of them aren't, then we'll be careful about building our thought patterns around the idea of Roman not or Roman being champion until next WrestleMania. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. You know, I don't know, you know. So what I do know is this gets very interesting very quickly because to that end, I don't think any of us saw him getting pinned. Certainly not in a tag match. If somebody got pinned, we thought it would have been Solo, perhaps. Just like that actually happened at Night of Champions. So that wouldn't have surprised me. Roman getting pinned, even in a tag match, is a very big deal. And I don't think that goes without any sort of consequence. You know, I don't think it does. And I think the consequence, particularly because of the way he's handled the bloodline, I think the consequence ends up being severe. That's why I think the elders show up, because he might go off on the Usos, but he's not going off on his daddy. He's not going off on his uncle.
What if he does?
Or maybe he does. And then that really brings us to the maniacal Roman that you're talking about.
I like that. I like that idea. But I feel like it might be the reverse, meaning that we do the trial, he now becomes the maniacal, and then the elders show up. So now we're like, you know, because Triple H said this is going until when, next year? So I mean, the next big thing is SummerSlam, and you cannot. Well, I mean, you know, we're putting not Roman, we're putting The Rock back in the box as far as the possibilities, but like the idea is to still do something big. So I mean, maybe that would be the thing, but I mean, I don't know. The storyline, it's really interesting, man. I really do like this storyline. So well, there's so many possibilities, so many infinite. It's almost like Power. So many different universes you can go for with this. So
and I see somebody mentioning this in the chat, and it's got my brain moving, and that is the comment about what about Sammy? And I think Sammy is this outlier that we can't ignore, because even though he's over there with the tag titles, all this time, he has been trying to advise Jay. He has something to say about the match. Even before the match Saturday night, he had something to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Sami Zayn is fully out of the picture relative to the bloodline.
Probably not. I mean, he's still very over too.
Yeah, there's still something there. I mean, and so here's my question, right? You know, for whether you love Roman or hate Roman or the bloodline story or not, it's still something that we can sink our teeth in too. Do you think that this was something that was organic, or do you think this was something that, like, now we're getting a place where they're carrying it along, they're pushing it along? But if you think it's like they could have written this, they put this together, and now we're talking about it, and you know, it has so many different, you know, things, components to it, why can't we do this for other wrestlers?
I think they planned this, man. Like, so there's so many like callbacks and near falls that we see from like 3 years ago. The low blow kick out that Jay was on the receiving end back at Clash Champion in 2020. If you look at the first time Roman was pinned, I think that might have been it was a 10-man tag, might have been a Survivor Series match when Jay pinned him. It looks very similar to the way Roman was pinned at Money in the Bank, like the same outcome with the splash and everything, with Jimmy sitting in the corner the exact same way. So I feel like they know exactly the story they're trying to tell, which is why it's so engaging, because everything they do has purpose. So to your point, why can't the writers tell the story for other wrestlers? I just think it comes back to like the thing with we hear so often with creative control. People wanting creative control over their character and the things that they're like this, what they're trying to do, so they can tell the story the way they believe it'll be received. And we don't always get that with our performers.
To that end, I'll counter some of that and say, while I do think that the elements that we're seeing right now are clearly well thought out, I don't believe that in August of 2020, when Roman came back and won the Universal title, that this was the plan, that this story and all these details, I don't believe that was the case at all. I believe they caught lightning in a bottle and they ran with it. And what really, really worked, again, I've got to give credit to Triple H, because he's an amazing long-term storyteller. And once he got a hold of this last year, they were able to start putting some other things in place that really made all this thing really start to balloon and go crazy. From the rise of Sami Zayn. I mean, think about it. July of last year, we weren't really talking a whole lot about Sami Zayn. Once Tripp took over and we got to the fall, Sami got super hot, you know? And so I think this does serve as a template for other stories to be told. Part of the challenge here is, do we have other families that have such an organic and easy story to tell, right? The family of the Anoa'i family, they've got so many layers and so many wrestlers and so many people and so much history. I mean, who else are you going to find that has 40 years of history with that family like Paul Heyman does? Right. So I think it is a template for how a story can be told in the future. I also think that in this case, Roman, the Usos, that whole clan came with a family, a history, and all those things. It just required somebody putting the dots together and telling those stories. I don't know. I'm not saying that there aren't other wrestlers that have stories. Right. I'm saying that this one came with a bunch of things already that it was kind of easy to connect the dots to. Could it be done in other spaces? I think it could, given the fact that now you've got commentators who are willing to tell stories about previous promotions where other people have been, et cetera, et cetera. That's a case. But I think all of the history that's wrapped up in the Anoa'i family is something you just don't readily find in the average wrestler in WWE right now. See,
yes and no. This is where I disagree. And this is where, you know, I don't want to speak out of term because I'm not in the writer's room, but I'm willing to guess, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that this is where diversity comes in.
Meaning I totally agree with that.
You know, for instance, yes, you have the Samoan dynasty that's been there. We've watched that. However, you can have, for instance, somebody you know, Kofi when he was representing like, you know, the islands, and then you have, you know, somebody who's African American. There's stuff there within cultural history, because, you know, sometimes WWE and other promotions like to just put, oh, well, y'all look the same, so
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you're actually the same. Right. And it takes somebody who is diverse in knowledge, or at least to do the homework, to say, okay, you know, or even down to somebody from the West Coast and East Coast. Like there's certain things that you can play into, just actually digging into that person's personality, their past, their family, stuff like that, where you can create stories. So that's where the diversity comes in. You know what I'm saying? Even down to like, say it was your locks, right? You can create a whole storyline just by hair.
I think,
you know, you could do things, right?
And I think to that end, not only is diversity, I think, needed in the writer's room, but I think wrestling history is needed in the writer's room. And I think that's, again, one of the things that makes this live is this isn't like, you know, we're adding a fake member of the Anoa'i family. The thing that is the connector is, no, they're really all family, right? And we can really point to, and so this allows the wrestlers, you know, with the stuff that Jay will say in the ring, you know, when he's calling himself by his real name to his brother, you can do that, and it's extremely believable, and people get it because that's the real deal. So it's, again, to your point, it's not impossible, but I do think it takes a required digging. I think it takes creativity. I think it takes willingness and an understanding of the history of wrestling to pull, because again, think about it. You've got several second generation wrestlers that are there, or third. We can pull on. I mean, I think it's possible. It just requires, and then it requires people capable of pulling it off. That's the other piece of it, right?
And doing the nuances of it.
Yes, that's the secret sauce here. You know, the secret sauce is that they do that.
Nuances.
Yes, and because they understand it, it's so good that we moved from being wrestling fans to going back to our love of Scandal, right? Like we all became gladiators again. And so now you've got people looking for, wow, it was 10 years ago with this same pinfall. And we weren't doing that a year ago. We weren't, because there weren't those kinds of layers to this story. So it's interesting. It's great. Okay. So we were saying, could this same kind of storytelling be done? Can we make the argument that there was the attempt to add these same kind of layers to Bray Wyatt? Because there were all kinds of layers. When I say layers, think about it. The whole White Rabbit thing. We had the QR codes we were going down. We were going down this whole rabbit hole. When we discovered it was him, wow. Then we got Uncle Howdy. Then so we were getting to it. And then somewhere in there, it fully didn't pay off. Now, I don't know if that's because the story couldn't be followed. I don't know if it was Bray couldn't pull it off. I don't know if it was too abstract. I don't know if it was injury showed up. But there's an interesting difference, I think, between how this Bray Wyatt situation happened, and there were layers, and the bloodline, and there were layers. So I think there's something to that.
Yes and no.
I'm glad you brought up Bray Wyatt too, because I was going to bring him up for one of our other stories when we'll get to that later. But yeah, you bring an interesting point as far as having the people capable of pulling off the nuances, and I think. Yeah, everybody was engaged for the QR codes, the White Rabbit, stuff like that, all the way up until the reveal when it's like, that's your payoff. And then somewhere along the line, we lost those nuances and completing that story with other like tidbits that you could have done in promos. And who knows whose fault that's for. But like, the interesting thing with the bloodline is like, they haven't been restricted by injury or anything like that. Everybody's been pretty much capable and available. for a majority of the time, with the exception of Jimmy and the pandemic.
And it's funny because then that's when Jay showed up, right?
Mhm.
And Jay, who at that point was primarily known as a tag team wrestler, shows his chops to be a singles wrestler. And if you guys get a chance, the WWE was so brilliant in putting together this timeline, and it's an over 2-hour video chronicling all things the bloodline. But the way it starts takes you back to that pandemic era. And I have to tell you, the pandemic era really separated the men from the boys, right? And the girls from the women. From this perspective, we all were looking for Drew McIntyre to be the world champion. He was going to be that guy. Pandemic happens. Suddenly he can't connect with us in the same way he does with a live crowd. You bring Roman back. You put Roman and Jay inside Hell in a Cell with no audience, and we lost our collective stuff.
Right.
Because they were able to do something, and it wasn't just Roman, it was clearly Jay. And so I think that also speaks to, you have to have capable people who can pull this whole thing off. You can write the greatest stories, but if you don't have the people capable of telling those stories, and I think one of the big differences between this and Bray is that they told the story in the ring, and what they did in the ring mattered as much as the backstage segments did, right? So those points where Roman's telling him, I love you, I don't want to do this to you, in the ring while beating him up. Like,
right.
It's that kind of stuff, right? And I don't know how many other wrestlers can effectively do it. I'm not saying it's not possible, but you got to have the right players in there.
Yes. And I guess I'll make this final point before we move on. You have people like, Santana, who's been wanting Roman to like kick rocks for the better part of 6 months. And I'm sure she's not alone. I mean, we could talk about, Roman 5 years ago. What I'm referring to is that there are elements where the story lulls and they could just completely kaputs it, but they still push the story to us. And the reason I'm saying is that with certain stories, even though it might not be working at the moment, like who decides if we're going to still push this person or this story, regardless of what the wrestling community feels or says, and who decides we're not doing this anymore?
Perfect example is Austin Theory. Like I feel like a lot of stuff with Austin Theory still hasn't really resonated with fans, even with defeating John Cena. But like, he's still a focal point of the mid card and still has the United States Championship. So to your credit, yeah, there's somebody back there backstage, whoever the bosses are, is like, you know what, you're gonna get this until you actually accept it.
Right.
It just so happens that the bloodline is an acceptable storyline.
We're not back
It
there.
is.
So, okay. What do we got next?
So we got to do Miss Money in the Bank and Io Sky. And an interesting tidbit just came out. She's actually the second longest women's Money in the Bank briefcase holder at just 2 days following Carmella's year-long holding of the case, which is very peculiar because if you look at the other names on the list, a lot of them have only held it for a day, I believe. Asuka, a day. We know Becky Lynch left for maternity, gave Asuka the title. Nikki Ash, Monday Night Raw the next day after the show. And the rest were same-day cash-ins that include a list of Bayley, Alexa Bliss, and I'm missing one more. But this is interesting, and I posed a question to you guys here and in the chat. Has this been kind of a disservice to introduce the Money in the Bank if it was just going to be utilized so quickly? Because with Carmella, we saw her whole game change by having the briefcase for so long. She was able to actually develop a whole different persona and character on screen just by the fake attempts of cash-ins and being Miss Money in the Bank. That's how we got Mella is Money. So why are we doing that for more characters on the women's side of things?
So your question is, why aren't we? Wait, ask your question again. I want to make sure.
Why aren't we, like, for men who hold the Money in the Bank, we rarely see the same day cash-ins. They're able to carry the case for a while, build a character from holding the case. With the women, it's always instant cash-in. Instead of the one time we saw the very first Money in the Bank holder She developed a whole character persona off holding the briefcase. We don't see that with the women's Money in the Bank. It's usually the lottery ticket is instantly used.
TK, do you want to go first?
I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying before. I think this is definitely talking about. Santana's saying the same thing. I think it goes to what we were saying before, as far as diversity in the locker room and telling stories. We obviously Women's Wrestling Talk, like the storylines that WWE sometimes has for women, I feel like they're not thinking it through. We're more than, we're friends and we're no longer friends. And sometimes they get it right and sometimes they don't. And I feel like the reason why the cash-in is so short for the women is that, they feel like they can't prolong it. And the easier thing is to cash it in. So I just think it's, again, where it's more of a diversity thing and actually doing the research. Because when you think of storytelling, it's only based off of a couple really main storylines, like the love storyline, the whole, the Jesus storyline. There's certain things, right? But we've gotten so many great stories off of those. So it's like, why can't we apply that and figure that out to women? Like, I just don't understand why there's always such a misconnection as far as telling stories. And we constantly go back to like literally the basics of, oh, well, they're women, they're friends, they're no longer friends, they don't like each other, like, and not really diving into all the other things.
Yeah. When I think about it, like the way I emoted when Dolph Ziggler cashed in, like he cashed in on Alberto Del Rio, and like the audience went nuts for that. And you're able to tell such compelling stories for somebody who's just waiting for their moment. Like, I don't know about you guys, I didn't like Big E's cash in because it's like he tweets out, I'm cashing in tonight. And it actually does it. It didn't really allow him to develop like him building up to that moment of like, hey, I'm next up. I'm showing you I'm going to do this. But like he just called a shot and did it. And I was surprised to actually pull the trigger. But with the women, it seems like every time I win it this night, I'm cashing in tomorrow or cashing in at the same night, which adds the shock value. But then that shock value fades because a lot of those champions haven't been kept at the top of the title picture, is what I've noticed.
So, couple things. One, I think we do have to acknowledge the 13, I think that's right. 13, 12, 11, somewhere in there, year gap between the first men's Money in the Bank match and the first women's Money in the Bank match. So you have a whole decade going on with men, and men did a lot of different things. We'll talk later about RVD and his cash in because RVD called his shot, and that was the second Money in the Bank winner. And since then, there's only been him, and I think it was Big E in terms of the ones who actually called their shot and told you they were going to cash in. Cena might be in that category too. I got to remember Cena specifically. There's that. I think for the women, in this case, outside of Carmella, most of them were already in a space where people knew who they were and people wanted to see them as champion. Bayley went on a great run as champion. Even Nikki Ash, they kind of had this whole build like she's going to make money. So let's not take a long time with her cash in. And her cash in was like either that night or the next day. One of those two. I got to remember that. But Carmella was in a case where her character needed development. And so to me, it made sense. Asuka, her situation really wasn't her fault. It was, Becky was pregnant. And so they passed the title on. Liv Morgan was a case where the people had been pulling for Liv. So for Liv to be able to do that cash in that night against an injured Ronda Rousey when they were still being very brand specific made sense. I don't know that it's been a scenario of, oh man, we're really not even holding on to the women's situation. I think they had another thing going on and they were really thinking more of in the moment versus super long-term with that. I don't have an issue with it. And I think right now with the EO piece, however long it waits, I'm good with it. because the question is, who will she cash in against? Asuka seems to be the match we all want to see, but her and Rhea would absolutely crush. Who knows? So I guess I don't see it as big of an issue, just because I think the people who won at the time, for the most part, the crowd was ready for them to become champions anyway. As opposed to Carmella, where there was the shock value of her winning the first Money in the Bank. And then the question was, okay, when could she possibly cash in? Because, the thing with Money in the Bank winners is you automatically, once they win, you start envisioning, can I see them as a world champion? Right. And so if you can't, then they need to take the time to help build the case so that you can. And I think that was the case for Carmella. But the other winners didn't necessarily need that. Now, for me, Io doesn't need that long, but we don't know how long Io is going to take to cash in. That's just my 2 cents on that.
Nikki brought up an interesting point, and back to what you said, it's like, can you see them as a world champion? I tend to disagree. I don't think a lot of people saw Nikki Ash as a world champion, which is why in her case, the lottery ticket of cashing on next match on Monday Night Raw works. But Nikki brought up an interesting point that she lost in her first title defense. So I feel like it's almost a disservice to not allow them to build the character and build themselves as a threat as they ascend to their eventual cash in. I don't know. Just my thoughts. I would hope that Io holds it well into the end of the year, because we already know that she's next up. But we don't need to hit the reset button on what's going on with Rhea as the most dominant character in the entire company, or whatever's going on with Bianca, Charlotte, and Asuka. Let that cook for a minute first before we just hit the reset button. Because I'd rather see Io have a lengthy title reign than just jump in, cash it in, get the championship, and then we're not talking about her come January.
Personally, I'd like to see another WrestleMania cash in. We've only had one. I think it'd be really
true.
cool.
It's another one.
Imagine a female WrestleMania cash in. That'd be sick.
That'd be a bigger moment too.
It would be. I think it'd be crazy.
Well, with that being said, we still have no answers because we don't know what's happening backstage.
But we're very happy that Io Sky is Miss Money in the Bank.
The right call, 100%.
Absolutely the right call.
What do we got next?
Well, since we're talking about Liv Morgan, now's probably a good time to talk about this. And I feel like there are some people who are going to love this story and some people who will hate it. Of course, as we mentioned, Liv Morgan is now one half of the women's tag team champions, as her and Raquel Rodriguez defeated Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey, thanks to Shayna's turn there on Ronda. And so what's so interesting about this is the pinfall that was made to win them the tag titles saw Liv Morgan pin Ronda Rousey. Now, here's what's the crazy part about this. We talked about Liv cashing in her Money in the Bank. That marked the first time that she pinned Ronda. Then she turned around and got a win that SummerSlam against Ronda, the second pin. This marks the third pinfall that Liv Morgan has had on Ronda Rousey. Now, I know there are lots of people who are making varying reasons why they could claim to be the best, and I'm sure somebody will use this piece of news to now catapult Liv Morgan into the category of being the best, as she now holds 3 pinfall victories against Ronda Rousey. I'll ask you guys in the chat as well, what exactly do you think this means?
Is she the only one? And who else has pinned Ronda Rousey?
Not 3 times. Nobody else can say they did it 3 times.
I'm just trying to think about who else has pinned her in general. Like,
I'm trying to remember who else has pinned her. Well, Becky. No. Yes, Becky. Becky pinned her at WrestleMania.
I thought she pinned Charlotte. No. She pinned Ronda.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember who else.
He said Charlotte twice and Becky once.
Oh yeah, Charlotte did pin her. Charlotte pinned her back in December of last year to win that women's title. Becky pinned her at WrestleMania 35. And then Charlotte did pin her again. I just don't remember the other time, but yeah. So, but to think Liv has pinned Ronda more than Charlotte and Becky. Does it mean anything? Does it not?
I feel like we talked about this back in like October or September, where, there's almost that believability. And I'm kind of agreeing with Ron and Nikki, where it's kind of like, if this was anybody else, then yes, but like no shade to Liv, but because it's Liv, then no. And I think that's why they allowed it to happen, because it's kind of like and of course wrestling is about suspending belief to an extent, but then it's like we have to almost like double down on our suspense of belief. It's like, okay, like you got the 3, but in real life. So I'm definitely agreeing with Nikki and Ron, saying I don't think it's gonna lead or mean anything at all.
And I think it's important for people to remember also how each of those pins happened. So context is a thing. You know, when she pinned her for Money in the Bank, she was already injured. Ronda was already injured thanks to Natalya. The second pin was Ronda actually having a submission hold already on Liv, and Liv kind of got the 3. And this one, of course, Shayna beat the brakes off of Ronda. And then there was a power bomb. And then there was an Oblivion, and then there was a pin. The Oblivion was right on her head, too. So, needless to say, it was never a straight one-on-one. Liv dominated Ronda and got the pin. It was never that, and that's where context, I think, really matters.
Even despite the context, I'm here for like the piggybacking of it. Like we see it in other promotions where it's like something like this happens and they make a whole T-shirt off of it. I think with Aaliyah, they made the I won in 3 minutes and 60 seconds, something like that. So like they should just make a whole T-shirt off it, because if Ronda's going to leave and you want to catapult Liv into be that next tier of wrestlers, like I pinned Ronda Rousey 3 times and you can't do it because she's gone now. I like it. They should run with it.
I think it's pure comedy. I think it's pure comedy. Why did Stephanie take my life with that, though? That's funny to me.
Oh, boy. All right. Well.
Oh, boy.
What do we got next?
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Well, you know, one of the big pieces of news coming out of, or really going into Money in the Bank, everybody thought that one of the big names to potentially win it was LA Knight. And people went crazy because of LA Knight's reception there in London. People have loved him. Everybody was screaming, LA Knight, yeah, like it was a whole thing. But not everybody's impressed with Mr. LA Knight, and such is the case with one WWE Hall of Famer, Kevin Nash, who says that LA Knight is a ripoff of The Rock. His exact quote on the Kevin Nash podcast went something like this. He says, am I the only one that sees that this is an absolute ripoff of The Rock? To the point where he cut the promo on Logan Paul, and he says, yeah, stick it. He says, what? Does everybody have amnesia? There's nothing original. And people talk about his promos. He says, finally, LA Knight has come back as a white guy. This is Kevin Nash's quote. He says, if you don't put that Money in the Bank in Paul's hands so you can the rest of the year say, oh, yeah, the wild card is that Logan Paul will be there. So basically he's saying, yeah, Logan Paul is not that guy. And I know a lot of people will probably have some issue with this one, but what do you think? Is Kevin Nash right about this? Is LA Knight a ripoff?
He kind of bugging, if you ask me. And I feel like everything is recycled. I'm pretty sure I've been looking through the Twitter feed and I see a blue cane running around. Like nothing's really original. And that's why I liked your thought earlier about Bray Wyatt and the buildup and the engagement, because there are fans that trash the Bray Wyatt thing because we never seen it before. It's original. So like we can't have it both ways as wrestling fans and take something that's never been done and not wait for it to build, but then something that maybe it is a carbon copy. Maybe he got inspiration from The Rock. Who didn't? Who hasn't? If that is the greatest person on the mic of all time, just let him do his thing. And I think there's a lot of people that are upset they didn't get the payoff that they wanted, and I get that. But now they're bringing in the ageism and saying, well, oh, Damian Priest is technically older than LA Knight. None of that matters. If it resonates with the fans, and I like what Triple H said at the press conference post Money in the Bank, is that good things come to those who wait. So they're going to continue to build off LA Knight's success. They're going to continue to sell merchandise, have them get the big pops in the arena. And when the moment happens, you will have waited for it. And once you wait for something, you appreciate it that much more.
I mean, it's kind of one of those things where is anything, like, I agree with Cedric, is anything really original? Like, I'm sure that, what's happening is we're getting better, but I'm sure if we take, for instance, the Attitude Era and, everything that happened there, we can put it against other things that happened previous to then and vice versa. So it is interesting. I kind of agree with Nikki where she said that it seems like Kevin Nash is a little bit hurt. Like, it's is anything original? Like, if we look at today and look at all the wrestlers we have now who are active, and let's take away, the Trishas and the Litas who've come back. We look at all the wrestlers that we have now. Is there anybody who is like so original that they have broke the mold of wrestling that we can't attribute to something even outside of wrestling? Like, we did an interview with Zoe Stark and she referenced like how she's taken elements from Pink, the singer, and this move and this. So it's like, can we say anything is original?
Originality is an interesting thing. And I think to a degree, originality is relative, right? It's kind of like in the 90s when, people heard certain samples and did not know that it was a sample, and they're like, oh my God, that's so cool, until you heard the original, of it. And so to that end, I think Kevin Nash's comment, I understand it. And at the same time, there's a couple of things to consider. Number one, as this podcast has taught me, people have entered the wrestling game at different times. So while Kevin Nash, certainly rocked with The Rock was only an active wrestler in the WWE for 6 to 7 years tops. So it's highly possible that the people who are aware of The Rock today know The Rock as an actor and never experienced The Rock as an in-ring performer. Same could be said for Stone Cold Steve Austin, whose time came basically ending around 2003. The Rock ended around 2001 to 2002. So the point is, it is highly possible. This isn't an issue of people remembering The Rock. It's people never saw The Rock in that space. So they don't have a point of reference to compare LA Knight to. Not just that, but when you look at some of the people that really are considered the greatest of all time, like, let's not even talk about ancillary people. Let's talk about people you would put on your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, right? Ric Flair, who acknowledges that he called himself the Nature Boy based on what Buddy Rogers did, who was the original Nature Boy. So that name wasn't even original. Ric Flair, by his own account, said he patterned himself after Dusty Rhodes and superstar Billy Graham, right? So Ric Flair, in his own right, by his own admission, wasn't original. Hulk Hogan, you can see the poses that Hogan took from superstar Billy Graham, right? Like, you can go through the top names in this business and they all attribute what they do to some other wrestler, whether it was the cadence of their talk, the way they perform in the ring. How many people are doing cutters right now that they grabbed from Diamond Dallas Page, right? The DDT from Jake the Snake, which was a finisher, the super kick, right? We can go through all of these kinds of things. So I think, it's borderline sounding bitter and things of that nature. But the thing is, LA Knight gets it done in the ring. His style is his own, certainly in ring, being charismatic. I kind of hate that being charismatic in the wrestling business automatically draws comparison to anybody who is charismatic in the wrestling business. It's just kind of how it is. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, we enjoy him. And if we enjoy him, what's the issue?
That's a nice little bow. You have anything to say about that, Cedric?
I agree with all that. And I wouldn't say Kevin is so much hating. I just think he's just misinformed. And maybe he hasn't seen enough of LA Knight to really form an educated opinion. And he just jumped to the first thing he saw. He probably saw that promo and was like, hey, this reminds me of this, without knowing any of his previous history in other promotions. how he's moved up from NXT to now. And you're just like, why is this guy popular? And if he doesn't do it for you, that's fine, but he's working for somebody else.
There it is. I mean, it's kind of one of those things like we have discussions and then it kind of like, but you're no longer wrestling glove, bro. If you don't want to, if you don't like it, then just don't. Just change.
But Damian Priest absolutely should have won the case, though. Like,
yeah.
I'm fine with that.
I'm totally fine with that. Totally fine with that.
Oh shit! Oh my bad. With that being said, we have one last story. What do we got?
Can we do the RVD story? Okay. So I haven't done a history fact in a while, but this is so significant that I felt like we had to do it. All right. So the year's 2006. We talked about Money in the Bank cash-ins. RVD wins the Money in the Bank in 2006 at WrestleMania 22. Calls his shot, decides he's going to cash it in on John Cena at the ECW pay-per-view One Night Stand. He wins a WWE title. The ECW reforms. Now he's crowned both the ECW and the WWE champion. All is right with the world, right? Wrong. Because what happens on this day in 2006, he goes to defend the WWE championship in a triple threat against Edge and John Cena on Monday Night Raw. He would lose the WWE championship to Edge. Then the next night on ECW television, he would lose the ECW championship to the Big Show. Why would RVD lose both titles 2 nights in a row? Well, it's because of what happened Sunday night, the night before Raw, where him and Sabu got pulled over and arrested for speeding. But when they searched their car, they found a lot of illegal narcotics. And Vince and company couldn't have that. So since that's your world champion, RVD the next day loses the WWE title. Following that, loses the ECW title. That all happened now what? 2006. That's what? 17 years ago today. And then RVD got suspended for 30 days. He lost it all because he had that narcotic in his car. Oh,
man. Does RVD have a book?
He needs a book.
I mean, he definitely needs a book. That's why I'm asking. Like, because it feels like there's just never with him, because I've met him in person, and obviously, you know who is. I think they're married, but Katie Forbes, like that. That's just a very interesting couple in itself. But yeah, if he doesn't have a book, he needs a book, because I feel like his stories are probably legendary, and maybe the reason why he doesn't have a book is probably he would be in jail. So
yeah,
there's that. I feel there has to be a statue where, you know, or maybe the book is coming, you know, when he's no longer with us. I don't know, but out of the people, I feel like his, and it's not even like, oh, I've gotten older now, I've slowed down. I feel like he probably had a whole story yesterday in Vegas. Like,
very likely.
Just
very likely.
We'll see.
Yeah.
RVD, go and write yourself a book, or have it ready so we can tell the story. With that being said, it's time for us to get out of here. We definitely stay tuned to Women's Wrestling Talk. We have our WOW post show happening right after this one, so don't keep it locked in. But Mr. Professor, where can everybody find you?
You can find me at Bonnerfied on all of the socials, and I'm where the cool kids are right now. I just hopped on to Spill. So you can check me out there as well. You can check out my commentary work for SHW, Southern Honor Wrestling, on IWTV. Brand new episode just dropped today, so check that out. That's really cool. Also, Battle Slam, you can check out on Fight TV. We just did an episode for the Nightmare Factory last week, so that should be hitting all the socials really, really soon. And of course, you can check me out here on my podcast at Wrestle Extra with the UK guys. And yeah, I'm here, there, and everywhere. Just check me out.
There it is. And Cedric, where can everyone find you?
Find me on the gram at Said is the Answer. And you can still find me on Twitter when it's working at Said Says. That's CEDD_SAYS. Check out my journalism work for HCTV on YouTube. That's Hawthorne Community Television. And you can find my articles for Daily DDT on that website. there should be a top 3 moments for Money in the Bank article dropping any moment now. So look at that in the next 24 hours.
There it is. Make sure you follow me on everything at TK Trinidad. Thank you guys so much for watching WWT Live. We're here Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, 3 p.m. Pacific time. Like I said, today we have the WOW After Show. We also have the Raw After Show happening today as well. So keep it locked into all things women's wrestling talk. The number 1 women's wrestling show on the planet. Ciao. Hey peeps, TK Trinidad here, boss lady of Women's Wrestling Talk. And I want to say thank you so much for watching, because you've got millions of options. Plus, you don't have to worry about sharing your password to check us out. But while you're here, hopefully you know we have so many more shows to watch, like Turnbuckle Glam, Raw Post Show, WOW Post Show, AEW Dynamite Post Show, Women's Wrestling Army Post Show, NXT Post Show, Impact Wrestling Post Show, AEW Rampage and SmackDown Live Post Show, On the Scroll, ROH Post Show, WWT Live, plus all of our interviews with the hottest women's wrestlers in the game. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our website at www.talkpod.com and follow us on all social media platforms at www.talkpod, and make sure to spread the word. That means send this to the group chat. Yes, even the person with the green bubble. Thanks again so much for watching Women's Wrestling Talk, the number 1 women's wrestling show on the planet. Ciao for now.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the number 1 women's wrestling show on the planet.